I always had a facility for the written word. It was something I wanted more than anything. I mean, I wanted to be a Beatle, but those jobs seemed to be taken. When I sailed right out of high school, it wasn't because I was necessarily in love with ships. It was because I was trying to figure out how to become a writer. David Simon had sold The Wire to HBO. In the second season, he said on the Baltimore waterfront, which I'd known my whole life, and I was on a ship when he offered me a full-time staff job for season 2. And I was making more money than I ever made in life. Like holy fuck.
Change isn't just coming, it's here, faster and more intense than ever. How will you adapt when technology shifts the ground beneath our feet? I'm David.
And I'm his brother Phil. And this is Whiplash Nation, where we explore the stories of people who've mastered the art of adaptation.
All right, welcome back, everyone. You're not going to want to miss this episode, especially if you're from Baltimore or you're a fan of HBO's The Wire. We have a really special guest on today.
Yeah, Rafael Alvarez. Yes, he's written for The Wire, but what you might not know is Rafael had a career on the sea.
He's like a modern-day Hemingway. He's gone back and forth from the water to writing to the water to writing. From career terms, we like to call him a boomerang. Many of our guests, they start in one career, then they move to another career and maybe a third, but he's gone essentially back and forth between two different careers. But a lot of the themes of how he adapts between each job or why he went back and forth between each job are the same if you were taking the linear progression from one job into completely different careers. The story ends up the same.
So what do you say, Dave?
I think we should jump into it. Let's start the episode.
Yeah, let's do it. Rafael Alvarez, welcome to Whiplash Nation.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
People know that you're from Baltimore, Maryland, but you're not at Baltimore, Maryland today.
No,
So where are you?
I am on a 940-foot container ship called the Maersk, Ohio, headed toward the English Channel en route to Antwerp, Belgium.
And you're not a merchant marine.
I am and I'm not.
Okay.
But currently I'm sailing as a correspondent for the Seafarers International Union newspaper. So I'm technically on here as a passenger, but I'm serving a seafaring function as a reporter for the union newspaper that gets read by thousands of seafarers.
Being on ships is not new for you. That's
why I said I'm kind of a seafarer and I'm kind of not. My father was a lifetime tugboat man in Baltimore Harbor. He sailed deep sea also as a chief engineer. I sailed on my first ship right out of Mount St. Joseph High School in Baltimore for 2 summers. I sailed on an old rusty container ship that went to Puerto Rico and New Orleans. Then I went to work for the Baltimore Sun for about 23 years as a reporter. I got off in 2001. The industry was beginning to collapse and they were paying us to quit. I got a nice little severance and I went back to sea for 2 more years. Then I got hired to write for the HBO show The Wire because season 2 took place completely on the Baltimore waterfront with longshoremen and ships. Led me to maybe 10 or 12 years writing for television and movies. And now I'm back at sea. I came aboard this vessel on January the 12th of 2025 in Norfolk, Virginia. And as I said, we're headed to Antwerp and then Rotterdam and then Bremerhaven, where I'm going to get off and just kick around Europe for a month before I come home.
You know, the theme of our show is handling change and handling change of careers. But you got a very, very long career in a creative field, being in a journalist, then going into the merchant marines, and then The Wire is obviously back into the writing phase. But talk to us a little bit about how you got into your first career. How did you get into the writing career?
Well, I would argue, and in my heart, I believe that writing is the only career I've ever had. I've done it in different capacities. When I sailed right out of high school, it wasn't because I was necessarily in love with ships. It was because I was trying to figure out how to become a writer. And this was before the proliferation of MFA programs. And I didn't know what an MFA program was, but I did know that a lot of my heroes went to sea, going all the way back to Melville and Jack London and even Woody Guthrie. You know, I don't believe Hemingway was ever on a merchant ship, but Kerouac was. And my father had connections that could get me on a ship with one phone call, which he did. I would say that if my old man was, you know, a lion tamer with Ringling Brothers, I would have asked him if I could have gotten a job with the circus. But driven not by the circus so much as driven by, you know, how do you become a writer? You go and you experience things. On that first ship, which was the SS Mayaguez, run by Puerto Rican Marine Management. She's probably scrapped by now. I always had a facility for the written word. It was something I wanted more than anything. I mean, I wanted to be a Beatle, but those jobs seemed to be taken. This is back in 76, man. This is almost 50 years. This was a different world of seafaring than it is now. And, you know, a lot of the older guys, to me, I was 18. The older guys were in their 30s. You know, when they would go to the brothel in San Juan, I was going to the library. Now, sometimes at the library, I achieved the same thing they were going to the brothel for, but I bought a copy of David Copperfield by Charles Dickens because I had never read Dickens before. I'm sure I was familiar with A Christmas Carol. But I knew he was one of the greats, and I knew that he had somehow mastered the art of the serialized novel where you would build like Legos, right? You would build the story. And I read that book. I probably got more out of it than I did in the degree in English I got from Loyola College in Baltimore, because I studied it. I read it and I studied it and I saw how he was putting it together. I read it for structure and I started writing my first little short stories. And I was also learning a little bit about the world. I'll never forget the second summer, 1977. And I was able to make enough on those ships to pay for a full year of Loyola College, which at the time, you know, your young people will gag at this, but it was about $6,000 a year. It's now in the neighborhood of 50 grand, right?
I tell my kids that all the time, by the way. My school was $9,000 a year, and they're like, they don't even believe it.
Yeah, they don't want to hear it. And one of the big cultural things I learned right now, you know, we're doing this from the North Atlantic. This was unheard of back in 1977. And we were coming into the port of New Orleans. We were somewhere in the Gulf, maybe halfway between San Juan and New Orleans. And we were just able to get TV out of maybe Houston or something. And Elvis had just died. This was August of 77, probably like August, you know, it was big news. And this African-American kid who worked in the galley came to check out what was on the news. And when he saw that Elvis was dead, he just started laughing, like, fuck Elvis, you know, which is a fairly widely held opinion in the Black community. Not for people that really, really know music, but in general. And I was sort of taken aback. I wasn't crazy about Elvis all that much at the time. I was into Zeppelin and the Who and the Kinks and all the whole British invasion, but it's something I never forgot. It was so visceral. It was an immediate reaction. I sailed in the summers of 76 and 77, freshman and sophomore year of Loyola College. In my sophomore year, this woman in one of my classes worked at the Baltimore Sun. And I had already met the woman that would become the mother of my children. And my last experience on the ship in the engine room wasn't a particularly good one. You know, this was a job at the newspaper. And she goes, I can get you a job in the circulation department. So I took it. I didn't know what it would lead to, but I knew that it would keep me in Baltimore and it paid a pretty good salary. At the same time, in 77, the Baltimore City paper had just started. And I've never been a shy person. And I saw the city paper at the Loyola cafeteria. I picked it up, and in the front was a phone number, and I called it. And I told them I was a writer. I was like 19 years old. This was September, October of 77. And they said, come on down. It was a bunch of Hopkins kids. And when I told him I was a writer, it wasn't exactly the truth, but it wasn't a lie. I've been writing for years, but in journals and little short stories and blah, blah, blah. And I would write my stories for the city paper on the typewriters of the secretaries at the Sun in the circulation department. I was friendly with some of them, and they would go home at 5 o'clock. I was working the night shift, and they'd say, "Yeah, sure, you can use my typewriter while we're gone. Just lock the door when you leave." My very first story for the city paper, I scooped the Baltimore Sun as a 19-year-old kid in the circulation department, and this is also seafaring related, and it's a testament to how the world works. The Baltimore longshoremen, the ILA, were on strike. The strike about technology, about containers. They were losing jobs because they no longer unloaded ships by hand, the way they do on the waterfront with Brando. It was all becoming these containers that you see pull off and put on.
The gantries.
Yeah. And so they were on strike about that. Either the Sun or the local TV, one of their reporters pissed off the ILA union, and they weren't talking to any reporters anymore. They're like, "You betrayed us. We told you this," and blah, blah, blah. And so I went to my dad and I said, "I would like to write about this for this little paper that I'm involved with." And his best friend's brother was the head of the union, was the head of the ILA. My father's best friend on the tugboats, his crabbing buddy, his drinking buddy, Mr. Jerome, who I knew my whole life, his brother Gilbert, Mr. Gilbert gave me the whole story. He was very helpful. He was willing to go on the record. I don't know if I got the skinny or whatever, but I do know that I got a story the Sun was not able to get. And this is another thing I'll never forget. I interviewed him at his house, in his living room, and somewhere in the middle of the story, I said, "Gee, Mr. Gilbert, you guys haven't talked to the press for a month. Why are you talking to me?" And he looked at me like I was a fucking idiot and said, "Who's your father?" That's all he said. I was like,
Yeah.
That's how the world goes round, right?
That's how it works.
That's how it works. Who's your father? Also,
Yeah.
he knew I was just a kid in college. He probably thought I was doing a school paper or something, but he was willing to talk to me.
The power of networking. If someone has change going on in their life, if you've spent the time building relationships and knowing people, and your family did too,
Yeah.
it's so much easier to transition into something else or take advantage of opportunity if you've built that relationship.
But David, let me tell you, this is just a glimpse into how the world has changed. And I could be wrong in the big picture, but I don't think I am. I recently gave a journalism lecture. I went and talked to a class at UMBC. Pretty much the same story I'm telling you, blah, blah, blah. So I leave, I do my little song and dance, and I'm on the elevator, and one of the students is on the elevator with me, a young man. He doesn't even look up and say hello. He could have said to me, "Mr. Alvarez, you could have blown smoke up my ass. That was great. Can you help me can you tell me how I can get public?" And I would have helped him because people helped me back then. He didn't even say hello.
It's a missed opportunity.
Yeah, but is that symbolic of the way kids are today? He was stuck on the elevator with me for 5 minutes, no inclination whatsoever. So anyway, after the city paper published this story, which was distributed all around town, I cut my hair. I put on a shirt and tie. This is so long ago, guys, that human resources was called the personnel department.
Is this a song? Because isn't this signs everywhere sign? You cut your hair.
Yeah.
You do this, do that.
Yeah. And I went to the personnel department with the story in my hand and, yes, sir, no, sir, the whole deal. And 2 months later, I was in the sports department. I had gone from circulation to sports.
Yep.
I was still in college. I got my degree, and they promoted me to the city desk as just an obit writer.
I think there's two lessons here I want to dive into. Because first, for people that don't know especially the younger people that don't know what the circulation department is versus the writing department, people think they want to have the big job, the big name, the big title, but sometimes you have to start wherever you can. I had a vision of being in this company or being in this position or this type of job, and I just found a way in. What is circulation department? Just anyway, so we can go back to that.
Circulation is the number of units, for lack of a better, number of papers distributed, circulated,
Yeah.
right? And circulation is the guts of the operation. Without circulation, it doesn't matter if you've just scooped the Watergate story. Circulation is home delivery. That's what circulation is. It means,
Getting the papers out there.
yeah, I was in charge of dispatching trucks for families that would call up and complain and say, that boy threw my paper in the bushes again.
Both me and Phil, by the way, were paper boys at one point. And
Yeah.
both of
okay.
us did throw the papers in the bushes.
Who was the better paper boy, you or Phil?
Phil was definitely the better paper boy. But the thing is, like, that's a job that doesn't really exist anymore. It's one of those things. But like, that's what it was, one of our topics. The other thing that you covered, you were doing a story about longshoremen and how technology was taking their jobs.
That's right.
People are afraid that AI is going to take their job, that automation and agents are coming in and the world is changing. But this has happened over and over and over again. And that's like a perfect example, where there was many people that pulled things off the containers, but now they had essentially robotics.
But we've never seen anything like AI, David.
Yeah, it's true.
What the difference with current technology is that it just moves at warp speed. What might have been that container strike back in 1977 might have been the biggest change in 30 years. Yeah. Now, every 2 years, 2 to 3, something's coming down the pike. And I think the best that those longshoremen were able to get out of that strike over technology was guaranteed jobs, even if it was standing around with a clipboard, for the guys over the age of 55. So a certain percentage would be able to work, even if it was make-believe work, so to speak. Anyway, so from sports, I went to the city desk and I learned to do everything from the ground up. I began with obits and cops. And at the end, I was sort of like the Baltimore folklorist. I got to wander around and meet interesting people and write profiles of real Baltimoreans. And to me, real Baltimoreans were the everyday folks, hardworking everyday folks who were committed to certain ways of life. I've written a lot of stories about the end of various professions. There used to be button grinders. You know what a button grinder is? He would work in a sweatshop and he would, where you button your shirt and there's the button on the right and the little hole on the left.
Yep.
They would put the holes in the jackets for the button to button.
There was a specific job for that.
Yeah, it was a specialized skill. And Baltimore's great for those kind of stories because you walk around and it's just it was a huge manufacturing hub, and now it's a graveyard for manufacturing. I spent 20 some years on the city desk. When I left that, I did somewhere around 10 or 12 years writing for Hollywood. And then my parents started getting older and somewhat infirmed. And I spent the last, from around late 2000 to last Christmas, taking care of first my dad who passed and then my mom who passed. And my brother and I took shifts, 4 days on and 4 days off, staying overnight there. And here I was 65 years old, back in my parents' basement in my little twin bed that I'd grown up in, thinking, how did I end up here? One of my favorite proclivities, if you will, is escape of some sort. Get me out of here, whatever it is. I don't feel that way right now. I feel really comfortable on this ship, but I certainly had get me out of here, taking care of mom and dad for 4 years. And it was, a little bit of guilt, a little bit of resentment, a certain amount of obligation, no small parts of love, but love all mixed up with, like feeling like you were imprisoned. And I said to myself, when this is over, if I'm still physically able, I'm going to go around the world and I'm going to do it without taking airplanes. That was the key part, no airplanes. And this is the first leg of that round the world 2025 trip.
So when you finish in, I think it was Antwerp.
Yeah, I'm going to go to Antwerp, Rotterdam, Bremerhaven, and get off in Bremerhaven, and then kick around Western Europe, probably a lot in France and Spain. And then I'm going to go back to the States because my youngest daughter is having a baby in late February. And then I'm taking a road trip from Baltimore, either by train or by bus, or maybe hitch a ride. I'm going to go to LA, spend a week or so with my other daughter and her kids, and then I'm going to catch another container ship for South Korea. I made a good friend in Memphis a couple years ago, this Korean blues man, who, if he was in the other room playing right now, you'd think it was Muddy Waters. I swear to God. I have friends all over the world, but it's mostly because I was the kid in the elevator that says, "Hey, mister, do you think I could do something for you?" I never even wanted to be a reporter. I just always wanted to be a writer, like whatever a real writer was. I'm a little snobby about that. I have a very critical, if not cynical, view of what is literature, what a real writer is. There was no guarantee or even a sense that, I'm going to take this circulation job and I'm going to make it to the newsroom. It was, I've got this circulation job. I'm still in college. I just started writing for this paper that gets distributed all over the city. I didn't write for the school paper. I've got this beautiful girlfriend, and I want to go see Frank Zappa as often as I can. And then when I finally did become a reporter, I got to interview Zappa.
When you were a reporter, who's your best interview? Who are the best people? Like, what are the best memories?
That's a lot of memories.
Yeah.
It's a lot of people. It was, for lack of a better word, authentic human beings. It wasn't celebrities. When I would do obits, you start out learning on obits, because in a 10-paragraph obituary, you have to compress a person's entire life. And there's 100 different little moments where you can get something wrong. And that's kind of how they test you. You can't go back to the editor and say, well, I think he graduated from high school in 1952. They're not going to coddle you. Like, well, was it 52 or wasn't it? Yeah. Go find out. So when I was doing obits once, this man, usually it was the men who died first, but this was a man who lost his wife. They had been married for 50 years. And in the middle of our conversation, he goes, we met over a 15-cent glass of root beer at the fair. And it hit me, and so I figured, you know what, I'm gonna try a little something. Instead of Mrs. Sarah Smith, 82, died yesterday, I wrote, they met over a 15-cent glass of root beer at the county fair, and the editors let it in. It wouldn't have been a big deal if they said change it. I could have changed it in 10 seconds, but they let it in. And it was like, click. This is what I want to write about. This is humanity.
How many obituaries do you think you wrote over the years?
At least 300, at least.
Yeah.
I mean, I wrote both my parents' obituaries. I now have a column for the Baltimore Fishbowl, which is baltimorefishbowl.com.
I was thinking, I have this thing. Everyone I meet, I always come up with their biography's book title. But for you, I almost wonder if there's a story within those stories. All of those obituaries. It's fascinating to me that you're seeing the humanity side and also the opportunity to meet and understand all these different types of people by going through what some might think is morbid. But it's actually, the way you put it, it's actually, wow, that's a really interesting perspective to look at an obituary as.
Sometimes the crime beat and the obituary beat would cross-pollinate in a way. There was these two sisters and their husbands, so 4 relatively young people, and they were dealing large amounts of marijuana, and all 4 of them were executed at the same time in this some sort of deal gone wrong. And all 4 caskets were in the same room at the funeral home. And it was one of the weirdest things I'd ever seen. And of course, as soon as they found out who I was, I got thrown out. But, I was there long enough. There's some things you can't learn. Like I said, I never went to journalism school. I have a degree in English, and my aspirations were always, I'm determined to publish my first novel before I die. I'm in the 4th draft now. It should be done this year. But there's some things that cannot be taught. And this is how much society has changed. 30 years ago, 40 years ago, if some kid from a rough neighborhood was murdered for his tennis shoes or his jacket, it would be front page news. Now, maybe that much, right? If at all. Not every homicide gets covered these days, which is beyond belief. Anyway, I would have to go up and knock on the door of the family. My editors would understand if I got turned away, but I could not tell them that I didn't try. And I talked my way into lots of homes where horrific things had happened. They would put more of a hard-nosed reporter like David Simon or Ann Lolordo. These were colleagues of mine. They'd put them on the crime story, and then inevitably I became the guy that did what we called the hearts and flowers, like the sidebar. You know, young Tommy's hero was, Lamar Jackson, and he wanted to be just like Lamar Jackson, and he was playing football at the wrong place at the wrong time. And then I've done obituaries on famous people, but never politicians, never muckety mucks or wonks or anything like that. Right now I'm writing a remembrance of Garth Hudson from the band, who, the band, right, Phil?
Yeah.
All right, yeah, because you're old enough to know.
Dylan's band.
I pride myself on being able to write anything. Some is much harder than others. I can write stories about stuff that I have no knowledge of whatsoever and no understanding. So my job is to find the guy that does know what he's talking about and say, please explain it to me like I'm 12 years old.
Yep.
And then translate it into, common English.
So you're at the Sun, 20-something years.
I was at the Sun from 1977 to 2001.
And then you leave the Sun, and then I think you went for a couple of years on the water again.
Yes, I worked on cable ships that tie up at Locust Point in South Baltimore.
Again, you're just getting out to get some experience and change up. What was the driver?
So I was on the city desk for 20 years. I had a phone in each ear for 20 years. I wanted the freedom to really write, so to speak. You'll hear that from a lot of writers who have to teach to make a living or whatever. They always talk about just want to be left alone and write. And I still had kids in college and one in private high school, and I couldn't just do whatever I wanted. Before I could go off and do my thing, I had to find a way to provide insurance for them, health insurance. Because nobody thought it was a great idea that I quit. It was the first major decision I ever made without consulting my parents. The reason I quit, we all thought we would die at our desks in the newsroom. The internet came and papers kept getting smaller and smaller, and each buyout was coming quicker and quicker than the one before, and each buyout was less lucrative than the one before. I got like a year and a half salary. People who left 5 years after me were getting like 6 months, and then the ones after them were just shown the door. And I had always had this hankering to go back to sea, and I also wanted to segue into writing books. I think by this time I had published maybe 4 books by then, 2 collections of fiction and 2 anthologies of my newspaper stories. And I was going to go to sea and write my family's seafaring history. My grandfather came to the American on a ship from Spain in the 1920s. I lived off my severance from the Sun for about 10 months while I put together a book proposal about going to sea and while at sea writing my family's seafaring history. And it went 0 for 13. No, I couldn't sell. They wanted to know how it ended. I'm like, I'm not on the ship yet. How do I know how it ends?
Yeah.
Yeah, like if I had a crystal ball, I wouldn't need to be writing for you. I'd have won the lottery by now. So in the end, I wound up going to sea just to have a job. The Seafarers Union has incredible benefits for its members, and I was making with overtime, I don't know, I was clearing maybe $400 a week. It was enough. I mean, I could chase money. You can't chase healthcare. And then during my second ship or third ship, or my second year of doing this, David Simon had sold The Wire to HBO, and he gave me a script for the first season. And then the second season, he set on the Baltimore waterfront, which I'd known my whole life through being a kid with my father and his friends, and then going to sea as a teenager. And I was on a ship when he offered me a full-time staff job for season 2. and I was making more money than I ever made in life. Like holy fuck.
Now, how did you guys get connected? Like, how did he find you? Was it another referral?
He was my desk mate at the Sun.
There you go.
Yeah, I was the first guy to welcome into the newsroom when he was right out of college. We'd been buddies by that time for, I don't know, 13 years,
Yeah.
We'd party together. We'd go see bands together. And we had also, in 97, I took a leave of absence from the Sun because he hired me to research a biopic on Muddy Waters with him. Oprah wanted to produce a bio of Muddy Waters. She pulled the plug for some reason. It was never made. I don't know. I've been blessed, or I have some sort of ability to transfer my experiences to somehow monetize my experience through the written word, whatever that experience may be. I went from The Wire to NBC. I moved to LA, which was taking a bit of a leap. And, my attitude's always been, how hard can it be? What's the worst they can do?
Yes.
How hard can it be? You jump into the deep end and you either sink or swim. And, I don't always swim, but I can doggy paddle pretty good. We went on strike in 2008. I was writing for NBC at the time. It was a 100-day strike. It went from Halloween of 2007 to Valentine's Day of 2008. And I was a strike captain and dyed-in-the-wool union man. And then when the strike ended, they fired us.
So it wasn't the right outcome.
They fired me, I can tell you that. They can't really fire you, so to speak. Our contracts had expired during the strike, so they didn't bring me back. Then everything kind of dried up. The 2008 Writers Guild strike coincided with the bubble bursting, the 2008 meltdown. So I said, I'm not going to be paying rent in LA without any work while paying a mortgage back in Baltimore. So I came home and I went full on. My journalistic skills were still operable, and I just went full on freelance writer. I got a couple scripts here and there, none of which ever made it. You can fail your way to $1 million in Hollywood. They pay you to write scripts that they never make. And that took me all the way through taking care of my parents. I now have a nice Hollywood pension. I have Social Security, and I can do things like ride ships, freelance a story here and there.
Yeah, I mean, the name of the show is Whiplash Nation, and you watch the newspaper decline and fall apart, and you jumped. That's what I'm hearing as a theme. How hard could it be? And you jumped off of that.
Yeah.
It was really, the writing was on the wall. We're talking to people about what to do when they feel they should jump off.
Okay, well, here's a good example of that, Phil.
Yeah.
There's a young man on this ship that I'm going to write about at some point. The deal I made with the union was they would introduce me to the ship owners like Maersk, that's the ship I'm on now, a Maersk line. In exchange, I'm writing little profiles of the sailors for the union newspaper. Like, they've never had a writer actually, like, at sea that could write little stories. But anyway, there's this apprentice. And this might be something for you guys to chase down at some point, like the 35-year-old apprentice, right? You think of apprentices as like 17, 18, 19, hanging out with the old Italian bricklayer or whatever.
Yeah.
This guy, not that Luigi. This guy managed an Amazon warehouse in San Diego, and he hated it. He just fucking hated it. So he enrolled in seafaring school, which is in Piney Point, Maryland. And he decided, you know what? I'm not married. I don't have kids. I can't stand working for Amazon. That sounds cool. I mean, that's, I think, what's missing with a lot of young people these days. The idea of, well, that sounds cool. Let me try that.
Yeah.
I'm not going to be homeless. I'm not going to starve to death. I haven't screwed over my friends. I have people that care about me. When I quit Hollywood and came back to take care of my parents and just survive as a freelancer, there were times. So I live in Greektown in East Baltimore. My parents lived in Linthicum near the BWI airport. And because I was there more than I was anywhere else, I got my P.O. box near their house so I could go. And there were times when I would scrounge up $2 worth of quarters, which isn't even 1 gallon of gas. It was enough to get me from East Baltimore to Linthicum. and check my P.O. box, which is where my freelance checks would come in, it almost never arrived on the day that I thought I was fucked, but it always arrived on time.
Yeah.
This sense of faith that do the right thing and you'll be okay. Doesn't mean it will always feel okay or that you won't be scared. I was always able to have $2 worth of gas to get to the post office and find that a royalty check had come in, sometimes for $800, sometimes for $80. But, the God of my understanding has never failed me. And when I look back, that's been true before I even knew what a God of my understanding was, in hindsight, So how hard can it be has served me well. But I'm also smart enough to know that I'm not going to enroll at MIT with the attitude of how hard can it be, because I know how hard that shit can be.
How hard can nuclear science be?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, fission, I'm going to do it this weekend, because I'm a dad too. And there's a lot of people now, because of AI, a lot of jobs are going away. Like Dave was saying earlier, there's 25 farmers. Now there's 3 guys.
Yeah, sure.
You had kids you had to have that insurance for before. Was there like that dark night of the soul? I don't know what I'm going to do.
I'll tell you. Let me give you an example, okay?
Okay.
I come from working people. I can always get a job and then hope for the best. But the way my ex-wife and I worked the tuitions after the divorce was, I would take the most expensive one because she stayed home for 8 years with the kids and was behind on the career track, so to speak. So I would take the most expensive tuition. She would take the next one in line, and then we would split the third one. And these were pretty expensive schools. This was NYU, this was Bennington, this was Bryn Mawr High School, Mount St. Joseph High School for my son. I'm getting ready to go, I think, on my second shift after quitting the Sun. And she calls and says, I don't have our son's tuition for this semester, and they've locked him out of the dorms. Now, this is a good kid. Today he's a chemical engineer. The kid was really busting his ass. And the idea of taking him out of school made me physically ill. Physically ill. And also I knew that his mother wasn't a party girl. She wasn't going on these big ass vacations. She was doing the best she could.
Yeah.
And so all I said, this is not even confidence. There's a difference between confidence and faith, right? Mm-hmm. Confidence sometimes can be a hollow shell. Faith is something different. And with faith, I just said to her, I'll take care of it. And I meant it. Also, there was a clock. I mean, because school classes were starting like in 2 weeks, and we didn't even tell our son what was going on. I just said, I'll take care of it. So I called somebody who had come into my life as a highly respected, wise elder. This was a guy I would call when I didn't know what to do.
Yeah, yeah.
And I'd sort of forgotten, since I don't think about money that much, I'd forgotten that I had this K from the newspaper. And it had like a lot of money.
You had 20 years of 401k that you
Yeah. I mean, I had, I don't know, maybe $140,000, something like that. And the way it works is if you take it out early, they whack you on penalties and they whack you on taxes. And again, as I said, the idea of taking this boy out of school made me nauseous. Physically ill. This wise elder said, Ralphie, the only difference 30 years from now between you and a guy with $500,000 in his 401k is he's going to be shitting his pants in a nursing home with wall-to-wall carpeting, and you're going to be shitting your pants in a nursing home without wall-to-wall carpeting. And I was like, bang.
Yeah.
Hey. Called up, took it all out. Through the college, whatever money they needed, took myself to a nice dinner with whatever was left over,
Yeah.
And wouldn't you know, Phil, that by the time the 2008 crash came around, people that had left their money in their 401ks lost more than I did in penalties and taxes.
Wow.
I have never sweated money since. I'm glad I don't have to work as hard as I used to work. And the other cool thing is that, I'm on board this ship with, I think, maybe 22 other people, 4 women and the rest men, engine department, in the galley or whatever. And they come to dinner in their work clothes, and they got grease on them and things. I finally really, really appreciate my work is every bit as important as theirs. What I do has value. It's not easy. I mean, it's easier now that I've done it for so many years. I had to figure it out. I had to sweat over those sentences. I had to wonder if anyone would answer the call when I needed some quotes or whatever. And I'm proud of my craft. It's nice to know what you're doing. They call me Mr. Alvarez. When I first shipped out at 18, they called me Junior. I swear to God, I'm the oldest guy on this ship. My father always supported my desire to be a writer. I don't know if he quite understood it, because my younger brother is an engineer like him. When we were kids, my little brother would be right next to Dad at the workbench, taking shit apart and putting it back. And I'd be hiding in the back of the basement reading the encyclopedia. A to Z. But it took me a long time to realize the struggle a lot of artists have is this real work? Is what I'm doing real work? And I hate the word creative. I hate it as a noun. All right, you're creative, but what do you do? Are you a painter? Are you a sculptor? Are you a writer? Are you a filmmaker? Are you a poet? Don't tell me you're creative. Tell me what you do.
If you were to talk to yourself when you were graduating college, what would the advice be to you? Like, after everything you've done and everything
Take it back to high school, Dave.
If you were going back and you're 16, 17, you're going to graduate high school, knowing what you know now, what would you tell your younger self?
Don't smoke pot. That's the truth.
Yeah.
For every time you want to get high, read a book.
Read a book.
That sounds like a flippant answer, but it's not. And in truth, not to get too deep into it, back then I thought I was partying, but actually I was medicating myself for shit that was generational in the family that I wasn't aware of. I had a lot of fun, don't get me wrong, but I took a lot of chances. By the grace of God, I survived them. So that would be my advice holistically. Actually, other than that, I've had a charmed life.
Yeah, you have an amazing life. I look back myself on the partying I did when I was younger, and I tell my kids now, because they're into theater, and they both want to be into theater, and they want to go to school, 4-year school for it. And
yeah.
If you want something like that, then my advice I would give to myself is just do it. Like go out and get into theater. That was my thing with the partying. I'm like, I could have focused on doing. Me and Phil are both into music. We could have focused on.
Which of you is older?
I am. By 3 years.
How many years?
3. I'm 3 years older.
It is uncanny how much you guys look alike. If you were to put on glasses and a hat and a little scruffy beard, I would say, hey, Phil.
To tell you the truth, there's a third brother too. So, and all three of us
together,
the same.
It's just ridiculous.
He looks like you guys too?
Yeah. It's like,
so at least you all have the same father, right?
Yeah.
Oh.
The other thing I would have told myself, because music has been a huge, huge part of my life, is funny, there's a kid on here that can't name all 4 Beatles. He's like 21 years old. I don't know. It was just, are you kidding me?
Yeah.
I would have told my younger self, go see a wide range of music and not just these bands that you're obsessed with. Go see more jazz. Go see some of these old bluesmen that, I knew who Muddy Waters was and all that, but, go see the guys no one's really heard of before they're dead. So that would have been it. So I went to a Jesuit college. I'm very much into Catholicism, but very far left liberal Catholicism. And I went to a Jesuit university. There was this whole building where they were doing things like, sending kids to El Salvador to do missionary work and learning about, Thomas Merton and stuff. You can't do it all. At the same time, I was a college sophomore with a full-time job at the morning paper at one of the largest dailies in the state. So you can only do so much.
Yeah, some would say you were already successful in college with a profession.
Oh, yeah, I was. I had a full-time job with benefits, but my editors were very savvy at the Sun. They said, yeah, we'll probably make you a reporter, not till you get that diploma. And not that I needed a diploma to do the work. I was already doing the work. They did it the way I would talk to a kid now. They were like paternal in that way.
They wanted you to keep in school. They didn't want you to give you the incentive to be like, why do I need to finish my degree?
Exactly.
Yeah, no,
Exactly.
it's interesting because we asked that question about what would you do differently or what would you tell your younger self. The other people, because this is about change, they would say things like, "I'd be more assertive this way. I would do that." For you as an artist, I love that you're saying, "I would listen to more jazz. I would teach myself Latin."
I
If
would be a little less assertive.
I'm
When my professors started seeing my name in the morning paper writing stories, they just passed me right on through. They're like, it was not a typical college experience.
That's interesting.
They let me slide a lot. All I wanted was a degree. I didn't care if I got a C.
It's
I
interesting.
was,
It's who like your dad, when the union guy said, "Who's your father?"
yeah,
They saw your name in print. They gave you a pass. It shouldn't be that way. Like you
but
should.
that's the way the world works.
The way it works.
But
Yeah.
that's also why, I don't want to get too political here, but that's why affirmative action and DEI is so important. Because the kids that come from nothing, I don't care if, what race they are, but the kids that come from nothing don't have a father whose best friend's brother is the head of the union. All right, Phil, did I fulfill you?
Did. Thank you so much for coming.
Thank you. I'm glad to be here.
If you'd like to learn more about Rafael, go to makinstreetbooks.com. Or you can reach out to him directly at orlo.lenny@gmail.com. Or his Instagram is @JohnnyWinterIsGod. As always, our theme music was composed by Michael Leventhal. Thanks for listening. See you next time on Whiplash Nation.